Episode 686. I'll go take a look. Harvey didn't expect Samuel to get so many men at once. He had a deep impression of Scarlett and knew how special she was to Bessy. However, he never expected Samuel to invite Giant Crocodile over at this moment. Unlike other people, Giant Crocodile didn't easily intervene in general affairs. When he did, it involved several forces and too many interests. The international forces were balanced with one another, and if anyone was to randomly be involved, the balance would be offset. Hence, his arrival had really surprised Harvey. After all, Giant Crocodile had no direct relationship with Scarlett. Thinking about it again, he also knew the rumors about Scarlett and 129. Jared seemed to have approached Scarlett, but 129 had always been mysterious, so he wasn't sure if Scarlett had really joined. Judging by the reaction and speed of Giant Crocodile today, he was convinced of the authenticity of this rumor. Otherwise, Giant Crocodile wouldn't have come in person. After Harvey finished speaking, the man from Fulton was shocked and stared straight at him.
129? What do you mean?
Instead of answering, Harvey moved closer to the men from the Underground Alliance. If Scarlett was really a part of 129, then Fulton had really sought their own death this time. Clarissa would take care of the remaining business, so Harvey did not need to worry. He still kept in touch with those from the Underground Alliance, the particularly fierce force in Austria. After establishing a good relationship with them, Harvey would find it much easier to deal with international cases. His whole body relaxed, but the others weren't so relaxed. Gerald looked directly at Lily. Lily took a step backward, knowing what he wanted to say.
I was in a rush.
Gerald continued staring at her. After he arrived in Evanston, he had secretly gathered the investigation department for Bessy and the others. The current situation of the investigation department was largely due to his efforts, so he hadn't paid attention to Lily and Jacob's affairs. He just glanced at her and said,
"No need to explain. I'll check it myself."
Without the slightest emotion, he withdrew his gaze and walked towards Harvey. After he left, Kyle retracted his gaze and glanced towards Fulton's men. Then, he glanced at the technician still holding his computer.
"Are you Miss Rogers' friend? Let me ask you a question."
The technician was very polite to Kyle. Thomas retracted his thoughts and listened as Kyle said,
"Yes, I lived in Uncle Grant's house before Scarlett." "Oh, Miss Rogers is from 129, right?"
The technician looked around, then covered his left hand over his mouth and whispered,
"Otherwise, Mr. Cree wouldn't have come just now. Forget it. Don't hide it from me. I already know this is confidential. I won't talk nonsense. I'll leave."
He went to find Harvey, leaving behind Kyle and Jacob, standing under the street lamp. Jacob's head was lowered, so Kyle couldn't see his expression clearly. He just coughed and patted him on the shoulder.
"Brother, you heard it yourself. I don't believe you haven't heard of what kind of place 129 is. We really don't deserve her. You should give up."
Having walked over depressed, Lily heard Kyle's sentence and her mind buzzed again.
"Kyle, what did you say?" "It's in the black market. There are many rumors on the internet. If you judge it seriously, even the 4 major families aren't comparable,"
said Kyle seriously as he scratched his head.
"Auntie, I think Scarlett probably feels like her circle is too different from Jacob's, but she used to have such a good relationship with Jacob. How did they become like this?"
Lily wasn't listening to him anymore. If she had been a little hesitant to find Scarlett when the butler had told her earlier, her head was simply spinning now. How did they become like this? The corner of Lily's mouth quivered, and she remembered warning Scarlett more than once, telling her not to make a move on Jacob, all because she had liked Victoria. Gerald had been rising in status slowly, but Lily knew that the foundation of the Grant family was still too shallow. So, an alliance by marriage was the best choice. But she never expected that the orphan Scarlet was too different from what she had originally imagined. Compared to her, Victoria wasn't worth a mention. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that she had contributed to Scarlet and Jacob's split. Suddenly, Lily spat a mouthful of blood and fainted as soon as she closed her eyes.
Mom? Auntie? It's settled.
Giant Crocodile opened the car door and turned on his Bluetooth headset. He called Bessy and said,
Brother, I found Kobe's men.
Bessy nodded.
He told me I didn't get up from bed in vain.
Giant Crocodile stretched lazily.
I happened to see Luke. I'll go to your laboratory tomorrow.
I already know. Hey, can you stop that research of yours? Bessy leaned on a pillow and raised an eyebrow. Giant Crocodile said faintly,
Forget that you're not helping me, but can't I even find Luke by myself?
Bessy pressed her temples. Don't scare him. She called Luke after hanging up with Giant Crocodile. Samuel drove back to the Bright family's house after sending Luke to the laboratory. The Bright family was unaware of the movement in Evanston. When Samuel's mother heard the sound of the car driving into the yard, she stopped talking to the others and threw the flowers in her hand aside.
We didn't prepare your share today. A single dog isn't worthy of eating. Oh, Scarlet, you're here. Quick, bring 4 dishes out. Scarlet, let me take a look at you. You've grown so thin.
Samuel's mother's temperament and eyes were like Bessy's, and Scarlet had a natural affection for her. After looking at Scarlet up and down, she gently turned to Samuel.
Didn't you just learn how to cook a dish the other day? Why don't you go to the kitchen?
Samuel was chased to the kitchen by her. He was speechless. He hadn't learned it well. Scarlet looked at him in surprise, remembering how Samuel had only been tasked to wash the dishes back in the school doctor's office.
This is...
When his mother was speaking, a middle-aged man in the hall talking to his father stood up and looked at her in surprise.
Uncle, this is Scarlet.
Samuel's mother put her hands on Scarlet's shoulders and introduced her.
Scarlet, this is his second uncle.
Scarlet politely greeted Samuel's father and uncle. His father was also very kind to her. After greeting her, he continued discussing with his uncle.
About the quota.
Seeing that Scarlet was still there, his uncle interrupted his next words.
You're all busy. We'll talk about this next time.
He silently glanced at Scarlet, interrupting Samuel's father in time so she wouldn't hear it. Scarlet knew this matter wasn't too convenient for her to hear, and she had no wishes to eavesdrop either. She turned to Samuel's mother and whispered, I'll go to the kitchen to take a look. Episode 687, A Morning in the Bright Family's House. Samuel's mother was elated, but she didn't show it on her face. She pretended to be unhappy and said,
Go have a look. I don't want to see him.
She stole a few glances at Scarlet when she went to the kitchen. She was thrilled. Samuel wasn't as useless as she thought. Samuel's uncle left after seeing Scarlet. He then said to his father,
The competition is tough this time. We won't have much chance with the Cooper family. I'll get more information from them about going to their place later.
Samuel's father thought for a while before answering,
I understand.
The uncle looked at Samuel's father. He wanted Samuel and his mother to help use their connections. Samuel was a close friend of Michael's and his mother was close to the lady from Austria. They were the center and support of the Bright family. No one dared to anger them. Samuel's uncle was afraid of Samuel as well. Hence, he didn't dare to speak his mind. He didn't stay for dinner as well and left after he was done with his business. The chauffeur opened the doors for him and he looked back at the house. The chauffeur then said,
Sir, I saw Master Samuel bring a girl back just now. He even opened the doors for her. Could she...
His uncle shook his head. He thought about Samuel's mother's reaction just now and replied,
I'm not sure. Let's head to the Cooper family first.
Samuel was a playboy in the past and had many girls before. The girl from just now wasn't special and wasn't his usual type, so his uncle thought that he would be bored with her after a while. But it was the first time Samuel had brought someone home. His uncle thought that something was amiss, but he wasn't sure of what exactly. In the Bright family's house, Samuel's father looked at the kitchen after the second uncle left and then asked his wife,
"Didn't you say it was impossible for the both of them?"
Picking the flowers on the table, she answered,
"Your son received some help." "Who helped him?"
he asked in shock. Samuel's mother placed the flowers back into the vase and said,
"It's a secret."
He was speechless. He then asked,
"What about the Cooper family? They might cause trouble for Scarlett. He also brought her to the camp. Many people in the family aren't happy about it. He was too rash, and she left a bad first impression."
He was worried as he tried to lower his voice.
"If he truly cared about her, he wouldn't have done this."
"You should care more about your son. You do not know what line of business Scarlett is in, right?" Samuel's mother threw the flowers at him after what he said. He had absolutely no idea. He didn't even know what Samuel was doing because it was classified information. They only knew that he was working in the 1st District. The center of the Bright family was Samuel. Everyone else in the family was too far from Samuel's circle, and they knew little about the work he and Michael were doing. Not even his father. Samuel didn't like to tell people about his work as well. The only reason his mother knew was that she was in close contact with Scarlett. Scarlett had told her everything. By the time Scarlett was done with dinner with the Bright family, it was already 10 p.m. Samuel's mother didn't want her to leave and asked her to stay in the guest room. It wasn't the first time that Scarlett stayed over in the Bright family. There was a period when she was trying to avoid Samuel and didn't visit the Bright family. However, Samuel's mother left the room closest to the corridor, especially for her. Even though Scarlett's memory wasn't as good as Bessy's, she could tell that the room was almost the same as the last time she visited. It was pink, and there were even 2 flowers at the side of the window. She could even hear Samuel and his mother talking outside. Scarlett leaned against the window and looked at the scenery outside. She heard the conversation outside and smiled. Her phone rang and she saw that it was Sergeant Baldwin.
"Team Leader Rogers,"
Sergeant Baldwin greeted. He was still at the school and he had just finished helping Clarissa with the people from Fulton.
"Are you free at 9 a.m. the day after tomorrow?"
"Yes, I am." Scarlett remembered it was about some training matters and answered seriously.
"I'll come to fetch you at the usual time."
Scarlett was still under investigation at the investigation department, so she agreed. "All right." The next day, Samuel's mother brought her out for a shopping trip. She had invited Scarlett to stay for another night, and Scarlett couldn't reject her offer. After they were done shopping, she stayed for another night at the Bright family's house. Scarlett slept very well in the Bright family's house because of the positive atmosphere there. When she woke up, it was already 8 a.m. She overheard some people talking in the living room as she was heading downstairs after washing up. His uncle was there, along with some managers. They were having a serious discussion while Samuel was lazing at the dining table. One manager was Susie. His uncle was surprised to see Scarlett and stopped speaking. The rest of them stopped talking as well after seeing her. Susie was especially shocked. She never thought that Scarlett would be at the Bright family's house.
"You're up?"
Samuel looked up from his phone and walked towards her. Scarlett could tell that they were discussing something important and didn't want to intrude. She greeted Samuel's parents before getting some milk and toast and then rushing out. Samuel knew that she was going out for matters about the 1st District. He took his keys and said,
"Let me send you there." Samuel."
His uncle was shocked at how fast Samuel volunteered to help her. Susie left without saying a word. The living room was silent for a while before his uncle sighed.
"Seems like he won't be joining us. Let's go without him then. We won't be able to enter if we're late."
He was really disappointed by him. He felt Samuel was really irresponsible for being more concerned with the girl. Episode 688, Meeting the God of War. Sergeant Baldwin was already there at the gates when Scarlett arrived at the 1st District.
Team Leader Rogers, Mr. Bright.
Sergeant Baldwin greeted both when they alighted from the car. Samuel nodded at him. He remembered the team leader from the previous camp and asked,
"Did anyone leave an impression this time?"
The three of them then walked towards the school. Everyone walking past knew Sergeant Baldwin. They saluted him from far away, and no one interrupted their conversation.
"Some were above average,"
Sergeant Baldwin said as he recalled the candidates. Only 300 were left when the candidates were passed to him. These 300 candidates would be undergoing new training. 36 of them would be selected and be personally trained by Sergeant Baldwin to be a specialized unit. They would be the trusted subjects of the Clark family and Michael. The different forces in the capital were secretly fighting for one of the 36 slots. When they arrived at the office, most people were there already. Some teams were keeping the order of the place. Sergeant Baldwin opened the window and let Scarlett and Samuel examine the soldiers.
"The list is here,"
Sergeant Baldwin said as he brought out a list for Scarlett.
"I've chosen 100. You can filter out the rest."
It was a long list. The first column was the name, and the subsequent columns were statistics of their abilities. The ones on this list were mostly rated B and better. The last column even had a background check. The function of the background check was to prevent spies from sneaking in. The 1st District was a vast place and was the target of many international forces. The second function was to balance out the influence of the different families in the capital. Even though Sergeant Baldwin was like a god of war in the military, he didn't have the permission to check on such things. Only Scarlett was capable of that. Samuel looked at it. There were 2 members from the Bright family on the list, but he wasn't sure if they would be selected. Scarlett then pulled out another chart with everyone's information. They eliminated one person from the list. Now, she would have to select 36 from the remaining 99. Samuel and Sergeant Baldwin didn't dare to disturb her while she examined the list and just stared at it. Then, his phone rang. It was a message from Michael. He asked Samuel to pick up Aiden from Northwestern University after he was done. Samuel was confused and asked Sergeant Baldwin,
"Were you guys babysitting the brat at the Clark family yesterday?"
Sergeant Baldwin replied,
"No, I wasn't." "Michael said that he's going to the Clark family. Weren't you, Marvin, and Rosemary there?"
"Yes." Sergeant Baldwin sounded a bit sad.
"But he was taken." "Who?"
Shocked, Samuel supported himself and said,
"Who could have taken him from you?"
Sergeant Baldwin looked at him and answered,
"Mr. Cree. He brought the young master to play with fireworks at Northwestern University."
Samuel was speechless. Forget it.
"They should be playing with fireworks today as well."
Sergeant Baldwin sighed.
"It's forbidden to play with fireworks in the capital. It'll cause air pollution, right?"
Samuel was speechless. He finally understood why Michael asked them to pick up the brat. He was playing with fireworks.
"I'll wait for you guys downstairs."
Samuel took his phone and headed down. As members of the Bright family were among the candidates, he didn't want to be seen as biased. 300 soldiers stood at attention at the parade square, with their commanders and family watching from the side. Samuel's uncle was at the side as well. The Bright family was already firmly rooted in the capital. Hence, the people with his uncle were just there to bootlick.
"Mr. Bright, isn't that Samuel?"
His uncle heard what the person said and looked back towards the entrance. He saw Samuel approaching.
"Samuel, why are you here?"
Samuel was surprised to see him.
"Didn't you send the lady home?"
Samuel was in casual attire today. He approached them with his hands in his pocket. then sat down and looked at the 300 soldiers. His uncle understood he didn't want to talk and then spoke to the others. Samuel was a bum in the past, but he had gotten better in the past few years, and the Bright family could see the change in him as well. Hence, the Bright family members that were against him had lost their power, and the remaining ones were loyal to him. About 5 minutes later, a group of people appeared at the entrance of the parade square. Those waiting at the side stood up to welcome them.
Sergeant Baldwin will be doing the selection himself this year. It would be great if one of our members was selected.
An officer next to his uncle said. He looked at the people at the entrance of the parade square in admiration and said,
It's such a pity that I'm too young. If I could get into the team led by Sergeant Baldwin, I could die with no regrets.
Sergeant Baldwin was the god of war, and everyone knew who he was. Even the generals from the previous generation admired him. Samuel's uncle was from the 1st District, and Sergeant Baldwin as well. He lifted his head in admiration when he heard that, looking excited. It was a common sight for Samuel already. Sergeant Baldwin was like Michael and Bessy, after all. They can't be regarded as normal humans anymore.
Samuel, I'll bring your uncle to meet Sergeant Baldwin. Do you want to come along?
The officer asked Samuel. Samuel's uncle was excited and said,
Samuel, he was once a comrade of Sergeant Baldwin. Do you want to meet him?
Samuel was texting Rosemary at the moment, hence he rejected the officer. His uncle then followed the officer. Sergeant Baldwin was chatting with someone at this moment, and a lady in casual clothes was standing next to him. People guessed if it was the legendary Miss Miller, but Samuel's uncle felt the lady looked familiar. The officer greeted Sergeant Baldwin smilingly.
Sergeant Baldwin, this is Cedric Bright. He had heard of you and wanted to meet you for the longest time.
Sergeant Baldwin turned to them. Scarlett then looked up and saw Samuel's uncle. Episode 689. The Fireworks Near Northwestern University. Scarlett had an excellent memory and naturally remembered Samuel's uncle. She glanced at him and only slightly nodded politely. Beside her, Sergeant Baldwin was talking to the officer who greeted him. The officer knew that Scarlett wasn't the oldest daughter of the Miller family, but was confused about Sergeant Baldwin's attitude towards her. When he turned around and saw the long list in Scarlett's hands, his heart suddenly trembled with realization. After exchanging greetings, he turned to Sergeant Baldwin and politely asked about her.
Sergeant, this lady is... She's team leader Rogers.
Sergeant Baldwin turned sideways and introduced her, but didn't speak further. Scarlett put down the pen and greeted the officer. The officer's mind turned several times and he hurriedly responded to her. Then, remembering Samuel's uncle, he introduced him to them.
This is Vice Colonel Cedric Bright. Sergeant Baldwin, he's also a fan of yours and has admired you for a long time.
At this moment, Cedric was still immersed in the shock of seeing Scarlett and didn't hear what they were saying. The officer thought he was in a daze after seeing Sergeant Baldwin, so he smiled and repeated what he said.
Oh, Sergeant Baldwin, hello.
Cedric immediately greeted him. Time was a little tight, so Sergeant Baldwin only exchanged a few words with them before turning to Scarlett.
It's about time, right?
Folding the piece of paper in her hand, Scarlett nodded. I still want to see their extreme reactions. Upon hearing this, the officer became more certain of his guess about Scarlett and quickly said with interest,
Sergeant, your business is more important.
They watched as Sergeant Baldwin and Scarlett walked towards the crowd in the middle. A long time after they left, Cedric finally returned to his senses. He turned towards the officer and asked hesitantly,
The woman with Sergeant Baldwin, just now. Her last name is Rogers, and she's not from the major families.
The officer knew the 1st District very well and lowered his voice to share his speculation.
I heard the ace team, sergeant, and the schemer composed this time.
Having said this, he suddenly remembered something and immediately asked,
Vice Colonel Bright, have you ever heard of the rumor in the military region? What rumor?
Cedric glanced at him. He knew little about the 1st District because it was an important secret, after all, and he had only been in contact with it in the past 2 years.
It's about Sergeant Baldwin's older sister,
the officer said as he walked back.
I heard it more than half a month ago. This rumor isn't groundless, and he also said he has a master. I'm certain now that this sister is Miss Rogers.
The officer finished sharing his speculation, only to find that Cedric had stopped 2 steps behind him.
She probably just finished deciding the 36 quotas. It has really been a blunder this time. She turned out to be the one to make the final quota. Vice Colonel Bright, are you all right?
He turned around. Behind him, Cedric looked up in a daze and stuttered.
I'm fine.
He glanced in Samuel's direction. Just now, he had still been wondering about Samuel's sudden appearance here. But now, he realized he had come to send Miss Rogers to the 1st District. He was now in a state of confusion and couldn't clearly hear what the officer was saying. His whole mind was filled with thoughts about Samuel and Miss Rogers. After returning to his original position, he continued staring at Samuel. While sending a message to Robert, Samuel felt his stare and asked without looking up.
Go on. You know Miss Rogers.
As soon as he heard this, Samuel knew what Cedric was about to ask. Putting his phone away, he crossed his legs casually again and lazily replied,
You mean the quota for the special training teams? She seems to be in charge, but you didn't ask, so I didn't say.
The main reason was that they had been very guarded against Scarlet. Although it wasn't wrong to guard against an unfamiliar person, Samuel had purposefully restrained himself from saying it. He had originally been in charge of the quota this time, but he had asked Michael to hand it over to Scarlet and deleted Sergeant Baldwin's quota. This had led to what happened today. On the other side, Scarlet was carefully selecting the 36 people. Among them, she had 6 acquaintances who were members of the 1st Assault Team in the neighboring city.
Instructor, it's Miss Rogers.
The members of the assault team lost their minds after the personnel were released, and they instantly turned ecstatically to the instructor.
Oh my God, she's really a member of the 1st District. She even knows Sergeant Baldwin, and she's selected planner for this time's quota. Instructor, you're really a genius.
Beside him, the chief of the training camp directly turned around and ordered,
From today onwards, it will force all teams to train according to the method previously arranged by Mr. Bright.
After the call, he looked at Scarlet's back and murmured,
Things have really blown up this time.
As for Scarlet, she didn't know what happened. After deciding on the quota, the rest was up to Sergeant Baldwin to handle. Although it was said that Scarlet and Sergeant Baldwin were on the same level, Sergeant Baldwin was, in fact, several levels of seniority lower than her. Seeing that she was about to leave, he put aside his business at hand and sent her out. Samuel was already waiting by the gate, standing beside his Cedric. Upon seeing Sergeant Baldwin and Scarlet out, Cedric trembled again.
Vice Colonel Bright.
Sergeant Baldwin greeted him rather politely. Cedric was overwhelmed.
Samuel, why don't you let Miss Rogers find Mr. Cree? He originally brought the training camp in the neighboring city. 6 people from their team have been selected, so it'll really be a big noise this time.
Sergeant Baldwin glanced at him. Samuel thought for a while and asked Cedric to send Scarlet off. Cedric was still thinking about which force was so terrifying to have 6 people selected. Before Scarlet could refuse, he immediately responded,
Yes, I'll send her off.
Scarlet looked gentle and easy to get along with. As Cedric drove along the road, he tried conversing with her. Go to Northwestern University. I have to pick up someone. One of my officers brought him to play fireworks. but it's not a beneficial influence on the child. Scarlett told him an address. Cedric heard the address and found it a little strange. Northwestern University was close to the pedestrian street, but the address wasn't from there. However, he thought a little about it and just smiled.
It's not a big deal to play with fireworks, as long as the area is big enough.
Scarlett glanced at him from the rearview mirror and smiled. After she said the address, Cedric found the roadside full of biochemical hazard signs a little strange, but said little and just followed her out of the car. There was a crowd here. Cedric didn't know that this was actually a secret base of Northwestern University. The guard here naturally recognized Scarlett and directly let them in. As he followed Scarlett inside, he became more and more shocked and was confused about this place. 3 minutes later, Scarlett took him to the air defense area. Before he could react, the sound of an explosion sounded not far away, and the road under his feet trembled. A slender figure holding a baby pointed at the mushroom cloud above his head and slowly said,
"Are the fireworks pretty?"
Episode 690. Miss Rogers is terrifying. Standing in place, Scarlett sighed and only stepped forward when the ashes had dispersed. She greeted Xander and Luke. Luke was recording the results of the experiment with a pen and paper. He had really been frightened by Xander's experiment yesterday, but was fine now.
"Did my brother ask you to pick him up?"
Xander looked down at Aiden in her arms and asked slowly. Scarlett nodded and quickly went to see Aiden. She and Cedric had both been shocked by the loud sound just now. Aiden was less than a year old, and she was really worried about his state. But in the end, the little boy's eyes were lazily opened, and he was looking at the fireworks set off by Xander for him. His face was undulated, and he even looked a little bored. Xander reached out to tap his nose affectionately.
"Your godfather will take you out next time."
He handed him over to Scarlett and asked,
"Samuel didn't come?"
"No, he's in the first district." Scarlett carefully held Aiden. She couldn't help but glance at Xander again when he referred to himself as his godfather. Many people wanted to be the little boy's godfather the moment he was born, but Bessy hadn't agreed at the time and had only let Clarissa. Scarlett hadn't quite understood, but now she definitely knew how wise Bessy was. If the little boy had such a fearless person, like Xander, as his godfather, then no one knew how chaotic he would become in the future. Xander tilted his head and ordered,
"Lynn, send them back."
He was worried about letting Scarlett go back alone. Lynn nodded. Xander and Luke still had to conduct the next rounds of experiments, so Scarlett left directly with Aiden. When they passed by Cedric, who had been standing aside in a daze, Scarlett looked up and said politely, "Can we go now?"
"Oh."
Returning to his senses, he looked away from the dispersing mushroom cloud.
"Yes."
His eyes turned to Lynn, who was following Scarlett while holding an umbrella. As Giant Crocodile's confidant, Lynn was full of hostility and had sharp eyes. It was obvious based on his bloody aura that he had killed enemies on the battlefield before, so few people dared to look at him. Cedric trembled and immediately retracted his gaze, not daring to look more. They walked out of the door. As soon as they walked out, a voice called from behind,
"Miss Rogers."
Scarlett looked back and saw the base administrator chasing after her with a miserable expression. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at her.
"Can you persuade Mr. Cree to leave? Forget about his experiment, but he's even pulling Professor Song along. If anything happens to Professor Song..."
Scarlett was a well-known figure at Northwestern University, and most people knew about her relationship with Bessy and Luke. Glancing at the administrator, Scarlett realized he looked much more haggard than the last time she saw him. She asked a little helplessly, "Where's Rosemary? Have you informed her about this?"
"Don't mention it."
The researcher beside spoke first.
The Clark family knows that Mr. Cree has already left the city center and is making a lot of noise, but they don't dare to control him."
Scarlett said nothing. That said, it wasn't the first time Rosemary had approached her because of Giant Crocodile. Just when Scarlett was struggling to reply, Lynn said behind her,
"Don't worry, Mr. Clark will be back in 2 days. This time, our boss is indeed going a little overboard. The base is full of talents, so Mr. Clark and Miss Miller won't leave him alone."
The administrator knew who Lynn was, and he was immediately relieved and overjoyed to hear this.
Thank you. Then, when will Miss Miller come back?"
Seeing his humble attitude, Lynn also sighed inside, wondering how his boss had forced them to become like this.
"Probably tomorrow morning."
Only after receiving this answer did the administration finally come alive. His face lit up radiantly, and he even greeted Cedric. Cedric responded apprehensively and then got into the car. He touched the steering wheel and sat with a straight back, aware of Lynn sitting beside him. He focused on driving and kept his eyes on the road. Scarlett was sitting in the back seat, looking down in distress at the sleeping boy. She didn't know what Xander had shown this little boy. He was still young and had enough sleep for the day. As she was thinking, a message appeared on her phone.
"Can we talk seriously?"
It was an unknown number. Taken aback for a moment, she thought about it and realized it was Jacob. She hadn't blocked his number and had only deleted his name. However, the number looked very unfamiliar at this time. She stared at the number for a long time before replying. Sure, she wanted to settle things with him and the Grant family. Before, she hadn't wanted to say more, not wanting to make things difficult for Gerald because of Lily. She had been satisfied with just getting by. But she was different now. After sending Scarlett back, Cedric went back to report the battle to the Bright family. He ignored the elders and the key members of the Bright family and directly poured himself a glass of cold water.
"Uncle, what's the situation?"
The patriarch of the family couldn't help but ask.
"We have received no news about the other quota. Is the Cooper family reliable? How are our people?"
Cedric only put down the cup and said simply,
"Miss Rogers is more terrifying."
Episode 691, Samuel's Mystery Woman. The other Bright family members thought about it for a long time and still couldn't figure out who Miss Rogers was. None of them associated Miss Rogers with Scarlett.
"Didn't you go to the 1st District today? The Cooper family is still waiting for our reply."
The patriarch was a little impatient. This time, the Cooper family had used all their resources to help the Bright family. After downing a cup of cold water, Cedric finally calmed down and calmly said to the head of the family,
"Yes, I did, and I saw Samuel there as well."
As soon as he said this, the patriarch wanted to ask why Samuel was there too. But before he could ask, Cedric immediately followed up.
"He sent that girl to the 1st District."
The patriarch looked up fiercely. Slamming the cup onto the table, Cedric said word by word,
"She's the planner of this trump card."
Bam! The cup on the table was accidentally swept away by the patriarch, and it fell to the ground. Everyone exchanged glances in the hall, rendered speechless. The patriarch's phone rang, but he didn't react. Outside, someone came in with the cell phone.
"Sir, it's from the Cooper family. There was news of an explosion at the 1st District."
Returning to his senses, the patriarch sat upright.
"Go on." "There's an unheard team in the neighboring city now, with 6 selected members inside. The news is still under lockdown and was just leaked. The quota will be released tomorrow."
But everyone knew that if it had leaked, the news was definitely true. This was indeed shocking news. It was rare for even one Bright family to be selected. But where had the dark horse of this 6-member group come from?
Then what about the Cooper family?
It took a long while before someone finally asked quietly. Susie was indeed excellent, and because she had liked Samuel before, everyone thought that she was a flower poking into a pile of manure. Thus, most people in the Bright family hadn't been opposed to this marriage, since Samuel had always been frivolous. But now, the patriarch shuddered.
Let's not interfere with the Cooper family and let them develop on their own.
Everyone knew this trump card team would be the Clark family and the 1st District's right-hand man in the future. Wasn't it obvious who Evanston belonged to now? If Scarlett was the planner of this team, it showed the abundance of interests of those people. It was too difficult to be a part of these interests and even harder to be involved with them. Forget about the Clark family, other than Rosemary, who was Michael's confidant. It was simply a fantasy to be involved with them. As for the Miller family, at first, most people thought that the Miller family's patriarch was easy to fool and wanted to get close to him to make use of his benefits. However, who knew that this foolish patriarch would directly weave his way out and pretend to be stupid? Shouldn't someone in such a position pay attention to his own image with respect and dignity? He even pretended to be a fool. As a result, the people in Evanston felt like the Miller family's patriarch was too unpredictable. The city mansion was deep, and it was even harder to deal with them than the Clark family. Thus, most people had given up trying to tie to the interests of these two families. Those who managed to do so weren't ordinary people, so the Bright family's patriarch shuddered at the mere thought. Regarding the 6-member team of Evanston, many forces had also tracked down the news, and major detective officers were receiving a lot of orders overnight. However, Scarlett wasn't concerned about this. While taking care of Aiden at night, Samuel went to Northwestern University's base to bring Luke back once he was done with his business. The two of them talked about Xander all the way. When they saw Scarlett busying herself in the kitchen, Luke asked her to come out, and Samuel also volunteered to help.
Brother, does this vegetable need to be washed? Brother, I'll cut it. I'm superb at it.
While watching anime with Aiden outside, Scarlett frowned upon hearing Samuel call him brother. Had Samuel forgotten that he was 2 or 3 years older than Luke? How shameless was he to call him brother? In the kitchen, Samuel glanced at Luke and found that the other party obviously found him more pleasing to the eye, and he couldn't help but secretly send Robert a thumbs up. Although Robert was just a lackey, it was indeed nice to hear his sugar-coated words. Samuel successfully stayed in the guest room next to the study that night. He woke up early the next morning. Luke had already left and Scarlett was having breakfast, which Marvin had brought over early in the morning. He was holding Aiden and feeding him rice noodles. After breakfast, Marvin would take Aiden to the airport to meet Bessy. After finishing her milk and throwing it into the trash can, Scarlett said, "I won't be going."
Where are you going?
Samuel remembered Gerald had given her a 5-day vacation. Looking up at him, Scarlett thought for a moment and then said, "I have an appointment with Jacob. I want to make things clear with him." Samuel paused with the bowl in his hand and casually filled it with oatmeal 2 seconds later.
Oh.
Then, he took out a donut and bit it distastefully.
What kind of donut is this? There's no taste at all.
Putting Aiden down to wash the baby bottle, Marvin glanced at him quietly.
It's the cream-filled donut that Miss Hale bought.
Samuel then said,
It's delicious.
Scarlett's meeting spot wasn't far away, so she walked over directly. Jacob had already arrived. He ordered Scarlett a cup of coffee, his whole person looking very dejected. The two sat opposite each other. Jacob held the cup in his hand and said with a wry smile,
I'm sorry.
Scarlett answered him seriously. You've done nothing wrong. This incident happened because of both of us.
Why didn't you tell me back then?
Jacob glanced at her dejectedly, but as if he didn't want to hear her answer, he immediately muttered,
Does Samuel know? Scarlett, you're unfair.
Scarlett was surprised to hear this, but her heart was undulated and calm. She took a sip of coffee and said, Jacob, do you know what my lifelong ideal is?
You want to be an inspector. You've always wanted to be an inspector since high school, so I thought you…
Jacob thought about that night in the bar. Silently, Scarlett just dialed Samuel's phone. Do you remember the first gift you gave me? She asked when he picked up. His side was a little noisy, but he remembered it clearly and said,
You mean the DSLR I gave you for Christmas in your senior year? You didn't accept it, so it's still in my room. Do you want me to bring it over next time? But it's a little outdated.
Why did you give me a DSLR?
Don't you like photography?
Samuel was surprised.
I saw you print out landscape films. When someone at school took pictures of the scenery, you would stop and watch for a while. You're a person who studies hard, but you still spend time doing such things, so I figured you must like it very much.
Scarlett smiled. Okay. She had always thought that Samuel had given her a DSLR because of Bessy's recommendation. But later, she'd discovered the truth. After hanging up, she looked up at Jacob, whose blood had drained from his face. Scarlett picked up her bag. I have someone I like. He's good-looking, has a good family background, and a good character. I'm not worthy of him, but I still want to work hard. Behind, Jacob was completely glued to the chair. He had always thought that Samuel was just like him, having a one-sided crush. But now… Scarlett went out and picked up a call from Samuel, who sounded quite worried.
Are you all right?
I'm okay. Where are you? Scarlett shielded her eyes with her hand and looked up at the clear sky. Samuel coughed a little.
I'm at the lounge across the street from you. My friends are all here. Those you met last time. Do you want to come?
In fact, Samuel had only asked casually. Scarlett liked the quiet and he really thought she would not come, so he was prepared to go down to meet her. Unexpectedly. Okay. In the lounge, the second-generation young men were playing together at this time, most of whom were from Samuel's bureau.
Samuel, who are you picking up?
The group of people leaned over curiously when Samuel went out. They had never seen him pick someone up so eagerly before. Albert touched his chin thoughtfully.
Albert, do you know who it is?
The others looked at him curiously. Albert chuckled.
Could it be the kid that Samuel brought over last time?
These people had all heard about Scarlett, but knew little about her. They hadn't even been able to find out her name.
I know, but who is she? How come there's no news of her at all? Albert, you have the best relationship with Samuel. How much do you know about her?
Albert thought for a while.
Not much.
Episode 692. Scarlett versus Susie.
But Samuel is very caring towards her, right?
Thinking about it, Albert glanced at Mr. Palmer, who was sitting awkwardly. Mr. Palmer silently played with the dice and said concisely,
Yes. Okay, but…
A man tilted his head as he glanced at Susie, who was playing darts alone.
What happens if the rivals in love meet each other?
He whispered. She had come without Samuel's invitation. Albert thought to himself that Susie wouldn't be able to win over the new flame. After all, if the Cooper family really had anything to do with the Bright family, why would they wait until now? But he said nothing and just slightly shook his head. Everyone basically understood now. Most of the people scattered to play darts and airsoft guns again. When Samuel returned, they stopped and enthusiastically greeted Scarlett. Walking beside her, Samuel had no intention of introducing her to the others first. Albert spoke first and introduced her.
This is Miss Rogers. Oh, hello, Miss Rogers.
With Samuel there, they couldn't possibly not give him face. They even enthusiastically called Scarlett and Samuel to play darts and airsoft guns. These people usually played freely, and Samuel rarely brought her to such places, also because of her quiet nature. He was very concerned about her state and looked down at her inquiringly.
"Do you want to play?"
This was probably the first time in their lives that they had seen such a humble side of Samuel. Scarlett shook her head. Samuel waved his hand, then sat down and played dice with the others. He intended to stay for 10 minutes before leaving. Susie also came over. Having been to the underground casinos before, Samuel and Michael weren't very interested in these minor games. After a few hands, he gave up all his winning chips to Scarlett and prepared to leave. Opposite, Susie's dice was almost crushed into pieces in her hands. Scarlett was still thinking about the DSLR, so she followed after Samuel, her reaction a little slow. Mr. Palmer immediately put down the glass of boiled water and followed the two of them. Swish! A dart flew obliquely from behind, passed by Mr. Palmer's cup, and inserted directly on the table in front of Scarlett. The noisy surroundings bidding farewell to Samuel and Scarlett instantly disappeared. Everyone looked in the direction of where the dart had come from, only to see Susie standing in front of the target. Without looking at Samuel, she stared directly at Scarlett icily. "You can't afford to play?" This sentence seemed to detonate something. The air seemed to freeze, and both sides had their daggers drawn. No one else dared to speak or move. Without speaking, Samuel lowered his head and pulled out the dart on the table, the darts reflecting cold light. The people around involuntarily stepped back and shuddered. In these few years, Samuel hadn't shown up in Evanston very much, and it seemed like everyone had forgotten how feared he and Michael had been in the early years. Even Susie was intimidated for a moment. No, just when the atmosphere reached freezing point, a gentle voice broke the silence. Everyone else looked over and saw the girl holding a glass of milk look up. With an obedient expression, she took off the glasses on her nose bridge, exposing her clear black eyes. Scarlett smiled and thought for a while. Left or right hand? Susie also reacted and stared deeply at her. What? This. Scarlett took the dart from Samuel and played with it in her hands. Then she glanced at Albert, the only one who could talk to her. "Do you play with your left or right hand?" Albert looked at her with a headache.
"Don't take it seriously. Susie is always like that."
Then he frowned at Susie.
"Don't throw a hissy fit here. Apologize quickly."
Susie pursed her lips. In fact, she was also afraid of the current Samuel and didn't dare to say the aggressive words in her heart. Albert heaved a sigh of relief and quickly resumed his peacemaker role. He walked to Scarlett and said quietly,
"Miss Rogers, Susie is always hot-tempered. Don't be fooled by her. When she first entered the military, she was the first female special soldier."
Scarlett remained silent and walked to the shooting area with the dart.
"Hey, Miss Rogers."
Upon seeing her walk over, Albert immediately reached out to stop her. He had only seen Scarlett twice, and he naturally felt like she would only be getting the short end of the stick if she competed with the expert Susie. But when she didn't listen to him, he turned to Samuel.
"Samuel, why don't you stop her?"
This place differed from an ordinary shooting area. Below was the target, and a faint single hole could be seen. On the wall above the target, almost 20 cloth bags hung from the top to bottom, and the ropes varied from thick to thin. Only by hitting the ropes and shooting down the cloth bag could they obtain all the big prizes inside. Because of its difficulty, most people could only hit the target, and the 2 ropes had been hit by Susie. Samuel seemed calm and unruffled and put his hand in his pocket while watching Scarlett.
"No need."
He obviously didn't want to say more. so Albert also remained silent. He only watched as Scarlett and Susie stood in front of the target. Worried, he wondered if Samuel liked Scarlett as much as he thought. The others exchanged glances, not daring to take part in this war. None of them could provoke these girls. "You first." Susie threw an airsoft gun at Scarlett. Scarlett weighed the airsoft gun in her hand. "You can go first." Taking a step back impatiently, Susie folded her arms. "Hurry up." Scarlett glanced at her. "Are you sure?" Susie didn't bother to reply to her this time. Sighing, Scarlett walked to the other side and picked up another spare airsoft gun. She raised her hand and squinted at the rope behind the target. Boom! Boom! In less than 10 seconds. Before everyone had returned to their senses, the 20 colored cloth bags hanging above the target had all fallen to the ground. Scarlett put down the airsoft guns and nodded politely at Susie before leaving with Samuel. Mr. Palmer remained behind and picked up all the 20 colored bags, which all contained good things. When he was done, he turned to Susie and the others who were frozen in place. "Don't ask her to play with guns." Episode 693. Inside Samuel's wooden box. "Do you know why she let you go first?" Mr. Palmer thought for a while and said to Susie, "Because if she had played first, you wouldn't have anything to shoot, just like what happened." Having said that, he couldn't help but remember the last time in the neighboring city. Scarlett's shooting skills had been unique even in the first district. Weighing the 20 bags in his hand, he quickly left, afraid Samuel wouldn't wait for him. After he left, the entire room fell into deep silence, and almost everyone's breathing seemed restrained. In the silence, a faint voice said, "Did you guys see that clearly just now?" "It happened so quickly," said another person quietly. "Richard, you and Albert both entered the barracks. Did you see clearly?" "It was terrifying." Richard was still staring straight ahead and gave 3 simple words. As soon as the professional said this, the air choked on the other people's throats seemed to release like a punctured balloon, and the atmosphere immediately relaxed. "Oh my God, I almost stopped breathing just now. Richard, is everyone in the special training camp like that? Their evil spirits are so heavy. It happened in just a few seconds. Did you see it? I couldn't even see it. It was just like watching a movie and the ropes broke in an instant. Based on her speed and accuracy, she should be from that place, right?" "Albert, didn't you say that she didn't know how to play?" The room continued chatting about the scene just now until Albert coughed. Everyone else suddenly remembered that Susie was still there. Thinking of this, they inevitably turned their eyes to her. They all remembered that Susie had provoked Scarlett first. These people admired Susie very much usually. Indeed, she was impressive and surpassed most men. However, compared to the situation just now, most people could only think of one thing. She had been crushed. Of course, they had a good relationship with Susie, and would definitely have comforted her and hyped her up in the past. However, compared to the scene just now, they really couldn't find a word of comfort. What could they say? In the past, Susie could barely hit 2 or 3 prizes at most, and it had been under multiple attempts. But what about Scarlett? Holding 2 airsoft guns, she had hit all 20 targets within 1 minute. How could she compare? Was it even possible? Could they go against their conscience and scold Scarlett? Susie herself was in disbelief. "Susie, you should have seen how crazy her skills are. I'm afraid no one in the first district can defeat her, so it's not embarrassing to lose to her either." Richard scratched his head and comforted her. Under everyone's stare, Susie's face turned from black to green, and after listening to Richard's words, her face turned from green to white. Finally, she staggered out of the room, saying nothing. After she left, Albert looked at Richard's head fiercely.
You call that comforting her? Aren't you just adding fuel to the fire? Are you poking fun at her?
Richard frowned.
Then what could I have said? Everyone obviously saw what happened. They're not on the same level. She provoked her first. But look at what happened. It can only be regarded as a lesson for her. There's always someone better.
Albert was speechless for a while, and he finally said dryly after a long while,
Where did Samuel find this great God?
In the Bright family house, Samuel opened his collection room and revealed a pile of things inside. He opened the wooden box and showed her the DSLR inside.
It's here.
Scarlett looked at the DSLR, then went to look at other things inside. There were very old wooden horses and various model toys inside. She glanced past them and looked at a book covered in glass not far away. 3 big words were written on it. 3-character classic. The handwriting was a little familiar, but immature.
This is the first gift Michael gave me.
Seeing her attention on the book, Samuel was silent for a moment, and then weakly explained.
He wrote it himself.
Scarlett nodded. No wonder the handwriting looked so familiar. She flipped through the book and finally couldn't help but ask, Why did he give you this book? Samuel naturally changed the subject.
It's nothing. Hey, look at this instead. It's a little yellow duck. I fought with Robert back then for this.
Scarlett noted this down and prepared to ask Michael when she had a chance. Then, she looked at the things that Samuel introduced to her one by one. While listening, she could almost imagine him playing with these things. Finally, she noticed a wooden box tucked in the corner. It looked handmade and the lid was closed, making it even more attractive to her. She turned to Samuel and asked, Can I look at that box? Usually very easygoing, Samuel was suddenly silent for a while. Upon seeing his reaction, Scarlett was about to tell him to forget it when Samuel walked over with ease again.
You can, but don't regret it.
While talking, he opened the box and let Scarlett look at it with a smile. Scarlett raised an eyebrow and walked over. The box was very large and had a stack of gift boxes neatly placed in rows. The first one in the first row was a pink box with a sticky note on it.
1-year-old Scarlett, happy birthday. It was a pleasure to meet you.
2-year-old Scarlett.
16-year-old Scarlett, don't be sad. 17-year-old Scarlett, I want to give you the entire world. I hope you get better soon. 18-year-old Scarlett, you've changed majors from liberal arts to science. It must be tough on you. 19-year-old Scarlett, hello.
Episode 694. Jacob Learns the Truth. Looking at these gift boxes, Scarlett's breath caught in her throat. She blinked. How long have you been preparing these? Samuel involuntarily touched a box of cigarettes and then said without daring to look at her,
Not that long.
He rarely smoked ever since going to the special training camp. Scarlett remained silent. A little nervous, Samuel leaned back and clutched the cigarette case in his hand. He took a cigarette out and put it in his mouth, smiling.
I just wanted to prepare it for my own eyes, but since you've already seen it, you can see if you like them.
He thought Scarlett would pretend not to see the gift boxes. After all, she had deliberately avoided him before and had purposely avoided discussing this topic. Michael had told him that Scarlett differed from ordinary people, and her family had too much influence on her. She was at the extreme point of fragility, balanced with strength. Samuel had seriously talked to the homeless man on the roadside of the investigation department. He couldn't understand Scarlett's feelings and hadn't dared to mention a word in front of her. Through the homeless man's calm words, and upon seeing his gentle smile when talking about his wife and kids, Samuel realized that this was a scar that could never be removed from their lives. The defense walls Scarlett had built in her heart were too high. Samuel originally thought that he might never see her open her heart to him, so her reaction this time was completely beyond his expectation. He suddenly returned to his senses and threw away the cigarette case. He directly grabbed Scarlett's arm and stared intently at her. He didn't know when he developed feelings for Scarlett. It could be the first time when she calmly entered the school doctor's office to find him for medicine, or it could be when he found her squatting on the ground, her head buried in her knees on a street corner. The moment he realized his feelings, he had been stunned for a while before completely accepting it. At that time, Bessy had asked him to take care of Scarlett. He had tried to use the proximity to gain her favor, but she had rejected his Christmas present. When he had gone to find her with the gift box, he had happened to see her with Jacob. Timing also mattered in relationships. Samuel knew Scarlett's character and knew that no one could shake her feelings once she was convinced. At a long distance away, he had seen the rare smile on Scarlett's face. She was in love with Jacob. The whole night he had smoked cigarettes in the office, but the next day, he acted as usual. In many people's eyes, he was just a frivolous young master, heartless and cold. So many years of his protective mask had even fooled his parents. But he was his real self with Michael and the others. His acting skills had deceived everyone, even himself. He had treated Scarlett as a real sister. He had tried hard to find joy in his sorrows. If he couldn't have her, it would be good to be siblings too. He treated Scarlett like he treated Bessy, so that at least he could watch her from a distance, and she would trust him enough to call him Big Brother. When the Flores families wanted to recognize Scarlett as a goddaughter, he had even thought of letting his mother recognize her too. Until later, when Scarlett broke up with Jacob. Once satisfied with watching her from a distance, Samuel was greedy for more. He knew he couldn't compare to Jacob, but he was no longer playing the role of a frivolous young man. He had followed Michael to the 1st District and had returned to the special training camp. Samuel's mother was right. Samuel couldn't compare to Jacob and was nowhere near worthy of the loyal Rogers family. But he wasn't convinced. Looking up, he stared intently at her.
"Scarlett, what do you think of me compared to Jacob?"
It was summer, and the air conditioner in the collection room had just been turned on, so the temperature had yet to go down. Through the thin layer of clothing, she could feel the warmth on Samuel's palm. She stared at him in a daze and was about to step back. However, Samuel refused to give her this opportunity and tightened his grip. He took the cigarette with his other hand, threw it onto the counter, and licked the corner of his lips.
"Am I worthy of being your boyfriend?"
In the past, Scarlett would have turned away instantly before they even got near to this topic. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Thinking of this, his heartbeat quickened in pace, and his fingers holding Scarlett's arm moved up involuntarily. Scarlett was about to ask him if he knew that her mental health was sometimes abnormal, but her mind suddenly went blank. When she finally reacted, Samuel's lips had already fallen on her lips. She froze in place and even lost her train of thoughts. The room was silent, and outside the half-hidden door, servants were chattering outside. However, Scarlett's mind was buzzing, and she couldn't even hear their chatter. Her whole mind was blank, and even her eyes were a little fuzzy. Samuel was a little nervous. He was usually such an imposing person who a group of second-generation young men didn't even dare to fart in front of him. But he had his tail between his legs at this moment. After the wave of courage of unknown origin washed over, he looked cautiously at her. Instead of getting angry or fighting with him, Scarlett looked at the gifts and said, "I'll open them."
"Go on,"
Samuel couldn't tell what she meant and just squatted silently beside her, helping her open the presents. One by one, each of them had been hand-picked by him, personally handmade. At the same time, Jacob was sent back to the Grant family's house by Thomas, drunk. Gerald wasn't home and was discussing the divorce agreement with Lily. Lily refused to divorce, but Gerald never returned home afterward, making her very uneasy. Upon seeing him drunk, she stamped forward and asked the servant to pour him a cup of tea.
"Jacob, are you okay? Didn't you go to see Scarlett today? What did she say?"
She had seen how fond of Jacob Scarlett was. When Jacob went to find her with his head bowed, Lily had felt hopeful. Until now.
"There are lots of other girls other than Scarlett. I will find another girl for you."
Jacob went to the bathroom and vomited, still not sober.
"I'm not getting married. What's the point?"
Hearing how serious he was, Lily froze and then cried out.
"Jacob, it's all my fault. Why is Scarlett so cold-hearted? I shouldn't have forced her to leave you and the Grant family back then, but she was mentally ill, had been in the mental hospital for a year, and was almost raped by someone. How could I be willing to let you be together with a mentally ill person? I'll go apologize to her. I'll kneel and ask her to forgive you, okay?" "What are you saying?"
Episode 695, Scarlett's Birthday Celebration. Jacob turned off the faucet and instantly turned to look at Lily. Lily quickly realized what she had just said and involuntarily took a step back, her face turning pale. Jacob closed his eyes. With his hands hanging on both sides and his nails digging into his palms, he opened up his eyes again and asked,
"Mom, what are you talking about?"
Back then, when he had a conflict with Scarlett, he had almost gone crazy. He had gone to the dormitory to find her, waited downstairs for her, and stayed at the school gates for several days. He couldn't understand why Scarlett was so cruel and refused to meet him, refusing to give him a chance to explain himself. But today, Lily's unconscious words pierced into his heart, word by word. He almost found it difficult to breathe.
"You forced her to leave?"
Jacob put his hand on the sink and stared at Lily. His whole body shook as he asked again.
"Just because she had been in a mental hospital?"
In the end, he didn't even know if he was talking to Lily or himself. 1,000 needles seemed to pierce his heart, making it difficult to speak. He remembered that he had even thought Scarlett was throwing a temper tantrum. But she was Scarlett, a self-reliant, self-respecting, and extremely stubborn person. Once she liked someone, she was almost willing to give him her life. This was the reason he had completely collapsed upon hearing that she was in love with someone else. But these were far less important compared to what Lily had just said. Been to a mental hospital? Yes, she had always been insecure. So, when she was in conflict with his friends, he had unconditionally stood by her side, but had still told her to stop throwing a tantrum afterwards. He couldn't think of these things. Looking faintly at Lily, he said,
"You knew everything, yet you didn't tell me a single thing. I watched her go further and further away from me like a fool. Mom, just continue this way in the future. I don't want anyone else."
He passed by her, staggered out, and ordered his chauffeur to drive away.
"Jacob!"
Seeing him leave, Lily sat on the ground with a broken heart. She regretted it. She really regretted it. If she had known earlier, she would never have separated the two of them, nor would she have done those silly things for Victoria. Once Samuel's relationship with Scarlett was confirmed, he couldn't resist showing off. Although he wanted to marry her right away, he remained a little reserved for fear of scaring her away. With Scarlett's birthday approaching, he had a wonderful celebration. Mainly, he wanted to introduce Scarlett to the people in the circle, so that others wouldn't hit on her. Seeing how serious he was, Scarlett didn't reject his enthusiasm. Neither she nor Bessy really enjoyed celebrating birthdays and hadn't officially celebrated them in many years. But this time, many people joined in the fun. Samuel's mother made a final decision and set the venue at the Bright family's house, then prepared for the lively celebration. It hadn't been so lively in the Bright family for years.
Can I invite Albert and the rest? Some of my childhood friends and those I was close to in school.
Samuel bit his pen and hugged her from behind. Still dealing with business, Scarlett replied helplessly, "Okay, go ahead."
Okay.
Samuel's eyes rolled excitedly. Remembering that the commando captain in the neighboring city was still in Evanston, he casually made a call. After that, he thought of Scarlett's side.
What about your roommates in college? Ivy, right?
The 3 roommates had taken great care of her at university, so she would have invited them no matter what. "I'll tell them after I'm done here," Scarlett said after thinking for a while. She had never celebrated her birthday at university, but the 3 roommates knew of her special circumstances and hadn't dared to mention it.
Okay, I'll go find Mom first.
Samuel snapped his fingers. At the same time, at Northwestern University's dorm room, local rent was expensive, and since 2 of the roommates weren't locals, they basically lived in the dormitory. As for Ivy, she didn't bother going home to listen to her parents nagging and lived there. She looked up from the web drama she was looking at and answered Scarlett's call with a shocked expression. "Scarlett's birthday's the day after tomorrow. She said she'll introduce her boyfriend?" The short-haired girl was drying her hair when she heard this. "You actually have another boyfriend?" She turned her head and took the phone. On the other end, Scarlett's heart warmed, and she leaned back on the table. "Many people might come. If you guys don't come, I'll treat you to dinner tonight." "No, we'll definitely come," Ivy leaned over and immediately said. Scarlett smiled. "Okay, call me before you arrive. I'll go out to pick you up." "No, there's no need. We'll go by ourselves." Ivy waved her hand casually. After hanging up, she asked the other 2, "What should we give her?" The 3 of them chatted for a while and discussed what to give. Finding a gift for someone was a technical job, and Ivy was very entangled. She knew Scarlett was an orphan and lived on bonuses. Although she wanted to give her something useful, she really didn't know what to buy. Thinking about it, she called her father, wanting to ask him if Scarlett needed anything at work. On the other end, Section Chief Soup paused for a while.
What did you say?
"I'm asking about Scarlett's gift. Do you know how she is and what she needs?" Ivy sat in front of the computer and browsed through gift suggestions on the forum. Section Chief Soup asked about the situation and found out that it was Scarlett's birthday. He paused for a while and said honestly,
"She lacks nothing."
"Ridiculous. Father, what's the point in asking you?" Ivy leaned back. "Forget it. I'll think about it."
"Wait, I have a suggestion. Just give her something from the heart. I heard she wants to learn photography."
Section Chief Soup quickly instructed before hanging up. Ivy hung up and complained to the others. "My father actually said that she lacks nothing." However, Section Chief Soup had given her useful information. The 3 of them prepared a set of photography equipment for Scarlett. The next day, they took a taxi to Scarlett's birthday celebration. When Ivy reported the address, the short-haired girl raised her head from her phone screen. "Don't you think this address is weird?" Half an hour later, the taxi stopped in front of a guard post. An armed officer stopped the taxi. The driver was shaking.
Girls?"
Ivy stiffly took out her cell phone and made a call. "Scarlett, you might have to pick us up." Episode 696. Where would you like these flowers planted? After Ivy finished speaking, she exchanged glances with the other 2 roommates doubting life. On the other side, Scarlett quickly got up and walked outside. "Give the phone to the guard. I'll be there soon." Upon hearing this, Ivy took a serious look at the sentinel standing upright. Scarlett actually called him a guard? "No, your guard looks like this?" In a daze, she handed the phone to the guard. After the doorman let them in, he saluted her. A minute later, the three of them got out of the car and stopped on the side of the road. With that, the driver spun the taxi around, stepped on the gas, and frantically drove away. The Bright family's house wasn't far from here, and Scarlett arrived in a few minutes. Seeing the three roommates squatting on the side of the road doubting life, she couldn't help but smile. Walking over, she squatted down in front of them, smiling brightly. Ivy lifted her head from between her knees and glanced expressionlessly at her. She blankly put a hand on Scarlett's face, covering her facial features. "Scarlett, look at the top of my head." Pulling her hand away, Scarlett looked seriously at the top of her head and asked, "Broken head?" Slap. Ivy patted her hand off and whispered, "It's green." Right when she slapped Scarlett's hand away, she noticed the sentinel looking straight at her. His gaze was a little horrified. Ivy really couldn't figure it out. "Let's go." Scarlett smiled and stood up. "I'll bring you in." The short-haired girl grabbed the grass and walked in behind Scarlett. The taxi driver drove to the intersection and was about to turn around, but because he was driving fast out of fright, an oncoming car approached head-on. His eyes turned dark. According to his driving experience of over 10 years, he was definitely going to bump into the car. He slammed the brakes and stirred the steering wheel, hoping to minimize the danger. Just when he was at a loss, the car on the opposite side rolled over while he was in a daze. By the time he reacted, the car had stopped steadily beside him. The driver in the red sports car took off his sunglasses and raised his hand to wave at him, smiling.
"Uncle, remember to watch the road when driving, let alone hitting someone. Hitting flowers and grasses aren't good either. Fortunately, you ran into me today. If it were 10 minutes later, you would have hit Bessy's car. 10 of your cars won't be enough to crash hers."
The man rattled on incessantly. After talking for about 5 minutes, the driver still didn't dare to say a word. As the man talked, cars lined up behind. 4 cars all parked behind the red sports car and waited quietly, not daring to press the horn. Finally, the man was done speaking. The driver cautiously stepped on the gas and drove outward. Through the rear-view mirror, he could clearly see that after he left, the red car slowly drove forward. The 4 cars behind it slowly followed, not daring to overtake the red sports car. Obviously, those 4 cars dare not overtake him. Upon seeing the 2 obvious red-letter numbers in front of the license plate of the red sports car, the driver trembled and didn't dare to look anymore. "We're here." Scarlett ushered Ivy and the others into the gate. While hanging balloons on the tree with her 2 helpers, Samuel's mother's eyes lit up upon seeing her friends.
"Scarlett, take your classmates to see the house first. Samuel has gone to pick up his friends."
Knowing that this was Scarlett's first birthday celebration in nearly 10 years, Samuel's mother was extremely careful and had decorated her entire yard. She had a powerful aura, but she was very easygoing. Ivy could naturally tell that she wasn't a normal person. The 3 obediently greeted her. Downstairs, Cedric was also helping to hang up balloons and greeted a few of Samuel's friends along the way. He took Albert aside to drink and went outside with Samuel's parents. The guard beside him understood little and whispered,
"Samuel, why are you doing all of this?"
Why were the family members taking part in these small things? Samuel's parents were busy because it was their daughter-in-law. After all, Samuel had been single for ages, and it was only right to worry about the woman he wanted to marry. But why did Cedric have to be involved?
"You don't understand."
Cedric shook his head solemnly and then went out. just in time to see Samuel's father receiving two awe-inspiring people. He recognized one of them as the commando captain with 6 gold-tier soldiers. Energized, he went over to greet him.
Hello.
This was a private occasion, so the commando captain only greeted Cedric and Samuel's father without saluting.
This is the commando captain.
Cedric introduced him to Samuel's parents.
This time, the important talents in the 1st District have heard of Miss Rogers, right?
At the mention of Scarlett's name, the commando captain was in awe.
Where are Team Leader Rogers and Mr. Bright?
Samuel's father couldn't figure out what it had to do with Scarlett and was stunned for a moment before taking him in personally. Letting the guest go ahead, he stayed a step behind and asked Samuel's mother,
Hey, where are these people going to stay?
They weren't Samuel's friends, nor Scarlett's roommates. They were from the 1st District. Before she could reply, another person came in.
Sergeant Baldwin.
Upon seeing him, the commando captain stood up along with Cedric. Sergeant Baldwin first greeted Samuel's parents, then turned to Cedric and the commando captain, recognizing both of them. Sergeant Baldwin was a mythical figure in the 1st District. It wasn't easy for people in the 1st District to see him. Cedric and the commando captain's hands shook.
Are you also here for Miss Rogers' birthday celebration?
Sergeant Baldwin shook his head. His eyes lit up when he saw Scarlett coming with Ivy.
Miss Rogers, Marvin asked me to plant some flowers here. Where would you and Samuel like them to be planted?
He solemnly raised the shovel in his hand. This was Marvin's excellent shovel, and Sergeant Baldwin was a little nervous about using it for the first time. Episode 697. The Price of the Mysterious New Flowers. Scarlett would definitely live here in the future. Bessy was reassured by Samuel's mother's presence. These flowers had been planted by Marvin, but because he was following Mary's father to the underground auction floor, he hadn't been invested recently. The flowers that were to be planted in the Bright family house today were Sergeant Baldwin's responsibility. Sergeant Baldwin was Marvin's #1 fan and was naturally very serious about the job, especially since Marvin had given him the shovel. Scarlett glanced at Samuel's mother. What do you think? Samuel's mother was also a flower lover and had planted lots of flowers in the yard, as well as potted plants in the hall and bedroom. She had spent a lot of money on hiring gardeners to cultivate these flowers. She directly brought Sergeant Baldwin to the flower room and walked to a piece of land in the middle.
Look, is this enough land?
Sergeant Baldwin looked at the size and said,
It might have to be a little bigger.
Her expression remained unchanged.
Okay, I'll let people clear these out first.
Upon hearing that the piece of land was to be cleared, the gardener rushed over, distressed over the precious flowers.
Ma'am, these flowers are very expensive. If they're transferred at this point, the survival rate isn't high.
Samuel's mother was rather nonchalant.
It's all right. Just build another nursery and plant Scarlett's flowers alongside me. It's a good idea.
Seeing how excited she was instead of being distressed, the gardener couldn't help but open his mouth, struggling to find the right words. Finally, he remained silent. Together with the others, they removed all the flowers on the land. He removed the last flowers. When the roots of the expensive flowers were damaged because of the transportation, he couldn't help but complain in distress to the worker beside him.
What kind of messy flower has to be planted with these flowers? It's nonsensical.
The worker shook his head.
I don't know, but they said it was Miss Rogers' flowers.
The gardener sighed. Although he liked this future Mrs. Bright, he really couldn't stand this as a gardener. Sighing deeply, he carefully moved the flowers aside. When the staff saw him pack up the precious flowers and was about to leave, he looked up quickly and asked,
You're not helping her plant the flowers? No, I'll take care of these flowers first.
The gardener shook his head and arranged the flowers nicely. Just as he was about to leave, Samuel's mother brought Cedric, her husband, and a young man in. Everyone was holding a few flowers in their hands. These flowers were covered with a plastic bag on their roots, and some roots were exposed, looking very random.
Sir, ma'am.
The gardener stepped aside and gave way to them. Cedric walked in and broke into a cold sweat when he saw Sergeant Baldwin digging the soil with a shovel. He blurted,
Sergeant, let me.
Sergeant Baldwin moved the shovel and squinted at him, looking very scary.
You want to take it from me?
Cedric then said,
No, I wouldn't dare.
Sergeant Baldwin withdrew his gaze and nodded. He took 2 steps back and watched Sergeant Baldwin dig a hole seriously, then took another 2 steps back and casually threw the flower aside. However, he didn't dare to leave. Beside him, the gardener was about to leave, but he looked down at the flowers casually thrown onto the ground by Cedric on the way. The leaves seemed a little wilted, and there were several red flower buds. He thought about it and walked out. As soon as he left the flower room, a light bulb went off in his mind, and he suddenly remembered something. He suddenly paused and then walked back with big strides. Stopping beside Cedric, he squatted down and seriously examined the bunch of flowers. Then, he took out his cell phone and clicked on a photo he had saved before. The photo showed a pot of flowers placed at the auction house. The leaves were the exact same as the bunch of flowers on the ground. It was the flowers he could only go to the auction house to take a long look at. But there was a pile at his feet at this moment. A pile. The gardener looked around blankly and saw another pile beside Samuel's father. The land that Samuel's mother cleared up just now looked to fit 16 plants. Boom! He fell down onto the ground. Beside him, Cedric was taken aback.
Are you okay?
Seeing the gardener staring at his phone in a daze, he couldn't help but take a look as well. The gardener's phone showed a photo of a potted flower and looked to be placed at the underground auction house. The information displayed next to the potted flower was 1 daylily, starting price $2.5 million. Cedric was speechless. A minute later, he silently squatted down and sincerely picked up the flower he had just thrown at his feet. Outside, Samuel returned with Slag Dragon.
Hello, I know you. You're Section Chief Soup's daughter.
Samuel greeted Scarlett's 3 roommates politely and steadily, completely different from his usual persona. The 3 of them were immediately baffled by him.
Scarlett, this guy's not bad,
whispered the short-haired girl.
He's handsome and better looking than you. He's a good person.
Ivy nodded frantically. Exactly. It seemed that they had forgotten about their previous suggestion of Samuel tricking her. Scarlett said nothing. Behind Samuel, Slag Dragon greeted Scarlett's 3 roommates with a smile, then turned to her.
My gift is with Jared. Go back with us in the evening.
He was naturally talking about 129. Slag Dragon was vivacious and loved talking to people, and he was very gossipy as well. Few people in Evanston knew him, and he had come today because of his teacher-student relationship with Scarlett. It wasn't the same for Jared, however. Many people in Evanston knew him, and things would explode if he really came over today. Okay, Scarlett nodded, expressing her understanding. Slag Dragon looked at Ivy and the others and shook his head.
The driver that you came with just now should be more careful. Next time, you should take fewer taxis. That driver was too careless.
Several people were talking at the same time. Not far away, the lively voices of Albert and his party halted. The entire garden was so silent it was left with the sound of the wind. A little curious, Ivy looked back. What happened? Slag Dragon said without looking back.
It's nothing. My little sister is here.
Who else could turn the entire atmosphere into a refrigerator? Episode 698. You're friends with Bessy Miller? Scarlett glanced at Ivy and the others and thought for a while. Oh, she's the friend who grew up with me. I told you about her before. Oh, I know. It's the person who used to skip class with you and fight when you were a kid. Ivy remembered the incident. Scarlett had mentioned that she had a brother next door and a best friend who was better than a sister. Because of her special circumstances, she rarely mentioned her personal affairs and mostly talked about her brother and best friend. They all knew that her family situation wasn't good. She's in Evanston too? Why didn't you tell us? Ivy looked towards the entrance, only to see a circle of people there. We're all friends. We should meet. After Bessy returned from Austria, Scarlett hadn't seen her yet. Yes, she's also in our school, but she's relatively busy. I haven't seen her much in school either, so I didn't mention it. Scarlett slowly explained to her. Come on, let's go meet her. She's wanted to see you guys for a long time. Having said this, she turned to Samuel. I'll take them to find Bessy. Samuel and Slagdragon also wanted to see her, but the 4 girls went first, leaving them behind to wait. Slagdragon put his hands behind him and glanced at the flowers' direction room. He rubbed his nose and said, I'll go in and look for her later. It was too crowded here and everyone in Evanston knew Bessy liked the quiet. The Bright family's butler directly welcomed her into the hall, not knowing where to put his hands. He also ordered the servant to make tea, but Marvin reached out to stop him. I'll do it. He glanced outside. Sergeant Baldwin hasn't planted the flowers yet? The butler lowered his head. He is still in the flower room. Samuel's mother and father have already arrived. When he saw Bessy, he quickly sent someone to notify Samuel's mother and the others, who should be coming out soon. Bessy leaned on the sofa without sitting and pointed her finger at the table. No need to be so reserved. Outside, Scarlett brought Ivy in, listening to her chatter away. Is her name spelled like this? It's a nice name, and she turned out to be from our school. Where were you from? Were you guys the school tyrants? The short-haired girl also nodded. It's a nice name indeed. The 3 of them were talking among themselves. They reached the hall. In the hall, a girl in a white t-shirt and jeans was facing them with her back. She was leaning on the sofa and seemed to look at the furnishings in the hall with a steaming cup of tea in her hands. Upon hearing them, she looked back at Scarlett and the others. Ivy and the short-haired girl's voices stopped abruptly. Scarlett, why didn't you mention that your friend... Ivy was in a daze, and her whole mind turned blank. Scarlett sighed. That's right, her last name is Miller. Her name is Bessy. Ivy's legs softened. Scarlett quickly supported her. Ivy only faintly glanced at her. Sit down first. Scarlett had already expected this. Although Bessy had graduated early, she would still teach physics students. President Flores would also ask her to brainwash the freshmen. Having entered the Supreme Research Institute in 1 year and led the domestic physics team to victory, Bessy had become a personal case that no one else in Northwestern University could replicate. Needless to say, every year, the Global League would play OST's theme song because of Noah and Nico. Almost half of the tens of thousands of students at Northwestern University were basically all Bessy's fans. Every year, those taking the postgraduate entrance examination and the PhD examination would worship her in the dormitory. Their computer department and the physics department were full every year. Hello, I'm Bessy Miller. Bessy put the teacup on the table, stood upright, and politely greeted them. Hello. Ivy and the others were still in a trance. Bessy was friendly to them, and they gradually became less restrained. They even asked her for an autograph and asked about other things. God Miller, do you still play games? Would you still be on shows with Film God? I like you guys very much. Oh, I even took a second major in physics. Bessy answered their questions one by one. After they talked for a while, Sergeant Baldwin, Slakedragon, and the others entered.
Miss Miller,
Sergeant Baldwin greeted respectfully. Coming in with a pair of slippers, Slakedragon glanced at the scene and couldn't help but sigh when he didn't see Aiden.
why didn't those two come?
He was referring to Aiden and Michael. Bessy glanced at him and said calmly, "They went to Northwestern University." Slakedragon touched his nose and immediately said,
That has nothing to do with me. It was all Xander's work. He doesn't do any serious things and just goes to harm the elites of Northwestern University every day.
Bessy glanced at him. Slakedragon took the tea handed over by Marvin and lowered his head without daring to talk about it again.
Do you have a deal with the South Department? Matthew has someone who will check it out again.
Bessy leaned on the sofa. Slakedragon hesitated.
There was a minor disagreement.
Bessy nodded slightly. Be careful. They're a terrorist organization. Slakedragon reached out and showed the gun in his pocket to her.
Just look at this cheap good. You can tell Matthew not to keep an eye on me. Isn't that right, Scarlett?
The servant who was about to serve water to him trembled. Ivy and the others didn't understand their conversation at all. They finally returned to their senses and stared at Scarlett, doubting life. "Why haven't you mentioned this before?" asked the short-haired girl faintly. "I was embarrassed in front of my goddess today." Ivy also took a deep breath. "Scarlett, you've changed. You're no longer the pitiful girl I know." They paused, and Ivy suddenly thought of something. "Then, what about your brother?" Scarlett was silent for a while. Luke. Ivy and the other two roommates were speechless. Episode 699, To the Black Market. Scarlett's birthday party was vivacious. It was also an important indication of her status in the Bright family. After lunch, Bessy was about to go back. Samuel's parents personally sent her out. Cedric followed the crowd. His guard had calmed down a little after seeing Sergeant Baldwin, but he had completely lost his voice after seeing Bessy. It wasn't until she left that the guard let out a long breath and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Samuel took Bessy to the car and conscientiously told Marvin not to let her drive. Marvin sat in the driver's seat and looked up at him.
Michael asked me to ask you, is the wedding date settled? I'll go to Northwestern University later and then return to Fairfield in 2 days.
Samuel thought for a while and then asked Bessy,
Is Luke at school?
Bessy already knew he would find Luke. Go earlier.
Okay.
Samuel closed the door for her.
Drive slowly.
Recently, Luke had been very busy with Giant Crocodile. Today, Giant Crocodile had also dragged him to do experiments, so he was stuck at Northwestern University. Samuel stood there and waited for the car to drive away. He then turned back and prepared to talk to Luke about Scarlett. He knew that for Scarlett, she had two relatives who weren't real relatives. They were Bessy and Luke. Samuel only left when almost all the guests had left, leaving a few who were on closer terms with the Bright family, such as Cedric and Albert.
I'm going out to do something.
He sat on the armrest of the sofa and draped his hands around Scarlett's shoulders. He didn't tell her he was going to find Luke. Samuel's mother waved him away. Go. Then she held Scarlett's hand. Scarlett, Sergeant Baldwin helped you plant the flowers already. Let's go and see. While talking, she took her to the flower room. Samuel and his father were left sitting on the sofa. They exchanged glances, and his father said to him,
Useless.
Samuel looked up at him. You too. They exchanged tired glances. Samuel directly took the car key and drove to Northwestern University, wanting to talk to Luke about Scarlett. In the flower room, the gardener was bending down and carefully tending to the refurbished soil. The staff beside him looked at him curiously.
Sir, didn't you say that you won't help to plant the flowers? It has been several hours and you haven't even had lunch. The gardener said, "Shut up." He stood up with the small shovel and looked up to see Scarlett and Samuel's mother coming in. "Ma'am, Miss Rogers." He quickly greeted them, his eyes resting on Scarlett. Samuel's mother saw that the leaves of the newly planted flowers were a little wilted, and she asked Scarlett worriedly, "Can this flower live?" Scarlett smiled gently. "Yes, with Marvin's improvement, it's easy to cultivate it. I was on a business trip before and didn't water it for a week, but it was all right." Luke's house also had 2 pots of this flower. Scarlett really liked the beautiful colors of this flower. Bam! The shovel fell from the gardener's hand. Samuel's mother looked at him in surprise. "What's the matter?" The gardener's mouth trembled. "Nothing." "But the flowers must be changed every 2 months, so it's a little troublesome. I didn't want it originally. Auntie, if you find it too troublesome, just tell me and I'll ask them not to send it next month." Scarlett thought for a moment. She heard this flower was newly researched by Marvin and Mary's father, but she and Bessy had the same views and couldn't tell the difference, just that it was a little easier to grow. "It's okay, it's not troublesome. I'll help you grow the flowers in the future. You can just do your own things." Samuel's mother smiled. She didn't notice the gardener's legs soften again. Nodding, Scarlett chatted a while more with her and then left to get something. After she left, the gardener glanced at Samuel's mother and said with difficulty, "Ma'am, I think we should install a surveillance camera in the garden." "Whatever for?" she laughed. "The security here isn't good enough." Samuel's mother was naturally confident about her house's security. This was a special compound, and although it wasn't as secure as the Miller family's military defenses, it was still a dozen times better than the ordinary community. There was no need for surveillance cameras. "Take a look at this." The gardener silently showed her a press release he had just found. 2 minutes later, Samuel's mother said, "Get in touch with someone who can install surveillance cameras here." The butler was originally going to drive Scarlett, but upon hearing that she was leaving, Albert raised his keys and shouted, "Sister-in-law, I'll drive you." The butler turned around and saw Albert inviting Scarlett into his car like a lackey. Since there were still people in the house, he thought for a while and decided not to fight with him. In the car, Albert glanced at the rearview mirror and drove the car onto the road. "Where to, sister-in-law?" "The black market," she replied politely. The black market was very famous in Evanston, so Albert also knew it. He turned the steering wheel and drove while chatting with her. "Sister-in-law, are you familiar with God Miller?" "Yeah." Albert's eyes lit up. "Then, have you heard of the God cards?" Although Scarlett didn't play games much, she knew what he was talking about. "You can play with my account." She smiled. "Thank you, sister-in-law." With the wind at his feet, Albert stepped on the accelerator. They soon reached the black market. He carefully parked the car at the intersection and looked around. There was almost nobody out and about, and it was eerily quiet. He couldn't help but rub his arm and mutter, "What's going on here?" Then he turned around and said, "Sister-in-law, be careful. Keep your phone turned on. I'll wait for you here." Scarlett originally wanted him to leave first, planning to get a taxi back. But seeing that he refused to leave, she thought about it and simply said, "You can come with me." Recently, Giant Crocodile had provoked his rival, Augustus. Before he could cut off Augustus's head for Aiden to play with, the man had come to his door first. Thus, the black market hadn't been peaceful recently. In order to avoid hurting the innocent, Michael had directly sealed off the place, leaving only 129's men. Clarissa had come here more than once to destroy the bombs. Episode 700. Who Are We Playing With?
129's big building was as low-key as ever. No sign was hung outside. Albert had heard of 129 before and also knew it was located here, but he had never been here before. Other than 129's members and their partners, ordinary people rarely came here. Unless their family member was a member. Albert didn't recognize that this ordinary-looking building was 129's building and only surveyed the surroundings.
Sister-in-law, what are you doing here?
I came to take something. Scarlett pressed the elevator button. The elevator door opened and the intermediate member inside immediately greeted her.
Miss Rogers, I was just about to pick you up. Boss is waiting for you upstairs.
The person glanced at Albert and found him a little familiar. Scarlett smiled. Let's go up. They entered the elevator. Other than giving her his present, Jared also wanted to discuss some business with her. It wasn't appropriate for Albert to be around, so the intermediate member entertained him outside.
What's happening outside?
As a second-generation young man, Albert had good social skills and easily chatted with the intermediate member. The intermediate member smiled and poured him a cup of tea.
We're chasing after a convict outside, so it has been sealed off. Mr. Brown, this is my name card. I'm Sean Grint, a staff member here.
The intermediate member handed him a business card. Albert looked at it. Sean Grint? Was his name really Sean Grint? What kind of weird name was it? There were people with the last name Grint? However, he only wondered about it internally and put away the name card. Albert was still thinking about digging out Scarlett's news, but unexpectedly, things happened the other way around.
Sit.
Inside, Jared put down his teacup and handed the bag at his feet to her. Thank you. Scarlett accepted the plastic bag. Jared slowly took a sip of tea.
It's nothing much. Have you guys settled on a date?
Scarlett froze for a moment.
No need to be embarrassed.
Jared glanced at her, leisurely crossing his legs.
In 2 days, Lone Wolf's son will call me godfather.
Scarlett originally thought that Jared wanted to discuss Augustus with her, and she didn't expect him to gossip.
Didn't they say that the Bright family's young master is going to take over the 1st district?
Jared leaned back and raised an eyebrow.
Round it up. The 1st district will be 129's in the future as well.
There was no other choice. Bessy belonged to the Research Institute and he didn't dare to, nor had the ability to snatch her. If he couldn't snatch Scarlett over, then he would blow up the investigation department. Scarlett changed the topic. Clarissa.
You don't have to worry about Augustus. It's more urgent to settle your affairs.
Jared put down his teacup.
Giant Crocodile and the others know what to do. Lone Wolf has already been to Austria last time. They're really not so daring, and if anything really happens to us, they won't be able to get out of it unharmed.
This matter was already an international struggle and could only be negotiated by the few big bosses. Scarlett already expected that they wouldn't make any moves and was relieved to hear the confirmation from Jared. She went out with her gift. In the car, she opened Jared's gift. It was the 129 seal, showing that she held half the authority. Scarlett held it in her hand, feeling the heavy weight. She didn't expect Jared to give it to her today. Albert sent Scarlett back to the Bright family home and successfully got her game account. I've never played much. Scarlett smiled. You can go ahead.
Don't worry, sister-in-law. I'll bring you to the master level.
Albert couldn't wait to go home and log into the account. In poker tournament, a master level was already considered a pro. After all, very few people, even in professional competitions, could play the supreme level. Wearing his headphones, Albert called his other brothers and showed off his rank. Samuel's account level was also high, and they had envied him for a long time, but didn't dare to use his account. Fortunately, Scarlett was more easygoing than Samuel.
Albert, are you ready? We're all waiting for you.
The urging voice of the others sounded from the headset.
Add me, quickly.
Okay. Albert's hands trembled as he entered Scarlett's account. He pressed enter. Staring intently at the screen, he watched as it logged in within a second. Login name, Scarlett Rogers. Level, Supreme Level, 20 stars. Albert was speechless. The people were still urging him on the headset. Albert, are you ready? Hurry up! Albert had yet to reply to them. A line of invitations appeared on the screen. Your friend Forrest has invited you to qualify for the arena. Albert? Albert wiped his face and said blankly, Let's go to the match instead. What's the matter? Is her rank too low for us to play with? The voice sounded anxious on the headset. Let's change to the match first. No, your ranks are too low. She's in the supreme level, 20 stars. You're not worthy. Albert clicked on the ranking accidentally. There were 3 others other than Forrest. A sound came from the headset. Bessy, is it you? I heard them say that Scarlett's wedding is set to be on September 18th. You're probably not Scarlett. But Bessy probably doesn't have time to play either. Who are you? Albert didn't speak because he had seen the names of the 3 people. If you're not talking, could you be Bessy? Another female voice said. No way, she's busy with the laboratory nowadays. The professors haven't finished the experiment yet, so she doesn't have time. These 2 continued talking. Albert looked at the names of the 3 teammates with trembling hands. At first glance, he thought he had seen wrongly. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. From left to right, the names were Big Forest, Noah Hyber, Southern Nursery Rhyme, and the last one, OST, Toby Yearling.